Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Gigi Kopilak, and my guest today is Bartholomew Bland. Bartholomew was the curator at Hudson River Museum, but I want to congratulate him on his new position as the executive director at the Lehman College Art Gallery. Welcome, Bart.
Thank you, Gigi. It's nice to be here today.
Well, it's great to have you. So let's start a little bit with the Lehman College campus, which is great for me because I used to live a block away. So when I went to the show, it felt like I was going home again.
You're a native Bronx girl.
I am a native Bronx girl,
yes,
but wow, has the campus changed?
It really is booming, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's a beautiful campus. It's the old Hunter College campus that was built in the late 1920s, for people who haven't been there. And there are several very classic sort of collegiate buildings that look a little bit like Hogwarts from Harry Potter that are on the campus. It's a beautiful, I think it's 38 acres. And
wow.
yeah, no, we have a wonderful performing arts center that many of your Westchester audience might have been to. It's a house with about 2,500 seats, and the college also operates an art gallery, which is in a beautiful 1961 Marcel Breuer building, which is in the heart of the campus.
Right, it's a beautiful building, but also the way is the gallery new in there then, or has it been there a while? Because it's beautifully set up.
It is very beautifully set up. It's the building was built in '61 originally as the library for the campus when it was still Hunter. And they were commissioning some of the most prominent architects in the nation to do work on the CUNY campuses and the City University of New York campuses. And Marcel Breuer, of course, for New York audiences, might be best known for building the old Whitney building, Whitney Museum building on Madison Avenue, which is now called the Met Breuer.
Right.
So his name has really sort of been coming up a lot, and we're quite proud of the building. It has very beautiful pillars that sort of open up into these torqued pillars that are quite magnificent.
Right. So when you walk into the gallery, that's the first thing you see. In fact, that's the first part of the exhibition.
Yes, it is.
It's hard to describe. Is it fishing line?
It's fishing line and 15,000 silvered bobby pins.
Yeah, but you don't know it's bobby pins.
No.
I think so. The show is so diverse that sort of gives you a beginning.
A little bit of opening into the
right, because
exhibition.
it's bobby pins, but so that's sort of an oxymoron to the beauty of it. So you're bringing it down to hair, but it's not.
No, well, we should say the title of the exhibition, which is called Bedazzled, and it's 43 contemporary artists who are working in a huge variety of different media that are in the show. And we've interpreted Bedazzled to kind of be the new ornamentalism in contemporary art. So we have the bedazzlement of the body and people decorating their bodies. We have a bedazzlement of the idea of the sublime in nature. With these very dramatic moments in nature that these artists have chosen to interpret, and also more of an abstract bedazzlement pattern, a lot of aggressive pattern, a lot of very sparkly objects, a lot of people working with glitter and sequins and mirrored bits. So it's all that sort of returned ornamentalism, which reflects back on artists of the 1970s from the pattern and decoration movement, which is a group of artists I've been interested in for a long time.
Okay, but it's not just that.
It's not. There are several of those artists in the show, like Robert Zekanich, Joyce Kozloff, Robert Kushner, who are older artists working today, who have continued working since the 1970s and having revivals and renewed interest in their careers, working at the top of their field. And emerging artists, we also have an artist who's still in a graduate program at Lehman College. We try to have a wide, diverse range from Damien Hirst.
So famous artists to emerging artists you're having there. It's very interesting. But let me go back to this when we first walk in, because I wanted a couple of pictures that we have of the galleries. So you see that it's huge ceilings.
Big ceilings. It's about 7,000 square feet, the space that we're currently using as the gallery. As I mentioned, it was built originally as the library, and it was converted into the art gallery about 32 years ago. And so we've been running as an art gallery ever since. And I've been there since May.
It looks very contemporary, though. So it's been there since 60.
The building's been there since 61. 1961, and it's been an art gallery. It was renovated, and the circular lobby that you see was put in at that time in the mid-'80s. So,
okay.
yeah,
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the work that's there. You have some very famous people like Damien Hirst.
Yes, we have two works by Damien Hirst, of course, the famous British artist, who's probably best known to many viewers for his his shark in formaldehyde, his sliced up cow, different things that he's done over the years that have caused great sort of scandal and celebration in the art world. He's a very commercially successful artist with gallery shows around the world. We have two different examples of his work in the exhibition. One, which is a spot painting, which he's very well known for, and the second one of his butterfly works. It's a print based on his butterfly paintings that are inspired by the cathedrals of Europe.
Right, the rose
windows, yes. In
In
most traditional cathedrals, over the main door, you'll see in the nave a huge round window, which is called a rose window.
Right, but he actually, in the original of this, used real butterflies.
Yes, and he's done many of butterfly paintings over the years, and usually the butterflies it's just their wings. The bodies have been detached, and the wings are laid out as you would a mosaic, or as you would pieces of stained glass, into very symmetrical designs that really emphasize just the beauty of the wings. And you could see, I don't know if you could see in the picture we're showing you, but there's a lot of glitter that's embedded either in the paint or in this print. So it's very reflective and glittery that way.
And let's compare that to the one that's it's written Your Name.
Yes, this is a new work. This is a new work, an artist named Paul Valinsky, who's been one of my favorite artists for a number of years. He's had great success at the fairs all around. You see him if you go to the art fairs in New York or Miami. And he shows with a gallery called Morgan Lehman Gallery in Chelsea. And he did pieces, all of his butterfly works are recycled cans, often beer cans, and he has them collected in Queens at a recycling center. The homeless actually bring them to the center. And they are transformed. He uses laser cut techniques to cut the butterflies out of the aluminum, and then they're painted. The one that he has in our gallery is called Your Name, and he's talked to me a little bit about how he liked the idea of the magical realism of that the butterflies, if you're looking at it as the viewer, it's not, if you're up close to it, you really can't see the cursive writing very easily. You see all the plants, you see the butterflies, little hummingbirds in there, you look at the details of the butterflies, but when you step back from it, it does these letters emerge, and he liked the idea of this magical realism that the viewer might be having this moment where the butterflies are giving a very ambiguous message to the viewer.
Yeah. So I had read that it was candle soot that he uses, so that you still see some of the patina of old cans. And
you can see the patina of old cans, and he'll often tip the items with the butterflies with glitter or gold paint, gold leaf, and he's very careful not to completely obscure the identity of the cans. They're not immediately apparent, but when you start to really look in at them, you can see the treading where cans have been run over by trucks in the street, or the asphalt's been embedded in them. And so there's a real metaphor there about butterflies, something that's transforming into something else. And you couldn't get more sort of wasted material as old beer cans that have been crushed down. And that he's able to make something so beautiful out of them as a kind of darker bedazzlement that I really like.
No, that's like a rebirth of something old and yucky and
into something beautiful. And yet you always carry the story of what you have. I think it's a lot like people's lives, you can transform yourself. We certainly live in a culture that's very big on transformation and moving on to a new chapter, but you always carry the remnants of your past experiences with you. They become part of the object as well. So
yeah, I love that you found that there's so much meaning to all, each work. The one that I was enthralled with is the one with the coins, the pennies.
Yes. It's actually called Penny Abstract.
It's big.
It's big. It hangs on the wall. It's several hundred pounds. We had to have the wall reinforced behind it.
And thick. I don't know if you can see it in a picture, but it's a really big, round sculpture.
It's a wonderful object. It's just a very sculptural object for something that's hanging on the wall.
And all the pennies, they're not don't paint it, they're not changing it. This is just the natural patina, the different colors of what the pennies were.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is a Colombian artist I've worked with a number of times with. His name is Federico Uribe. He lives in Miami now. And he's an artist best known for using found objects and collected objects, very simple objects in his work. And this, of course, is pennies, several thousand. And he sort of color-coded them by the degree of patina or age or wear that they have. And so some of them are very shiny. You know, newer pennies have a lot less copper, so they tend not to deteriorate as quickly as older pennies. A lot of the older ones are almost black from tarnish and wear. There's some that have some green patina where the copper in them has begun to oxidize. And he's laid them out, and so you get striated patterns within this shape, which is an abstract shape. But it's been interesting having the students come to the gallery because sort of looking at them about the kinds of things that they may see. I've heard it described as a gigantic eyeball, sort of an eye of Sauron from, I think it's the Tolkien stories, a moon crashing into a planet, a sombrero, any number of different
Right,
different
it's very
shapes.
interesting. Well, I stood there for a long time just looking at the different, how he could have possibly done it. It was fascinating. And then, but then you have like a scary kind of painting. It's a beautiful painting, but it's got the atom bomb, and it's.
It is, yes. It's a grand manner oil painting, which then has thousands of black sequins and rhinestones actually attached to it, glued onto it. And it's a diptych, what we call a two-part painting. It's two canvases that have been bolted together. And one is a volcano, and one is that very distinctive mushroom cloud that we associate with the atom bomb.
Right.
And so this is a young artist from Brooklyn. Her name is Jessica Johnson. I'm a big fan of her work. And it has a lot of meaning. Those two things sort of conjoined together of the nature, the sublime terror of nature of the volcano as a horrifying but sort of beautiful spectacle. That was a big thing in old 19th century painting, certainly Hudson River School painting.
That's true.
Looking at, you think about Frederick Church looking at erupting volcanoes in South America, that there's a beauty there in destruction, sort of sublime destruction that's quite terrifying.
So that's how it gets to be in a Bedazzled show.
Yes, and that's, I think, why she's added all these rhinestones to it.
Okay.
It's what I think the French call en grisaille. It's black and white, and it looks a little bit like old film footage or newsreel footage of these events. I think it sort of gives you a little bit of distance. She sort of distances from you. And then, of course, the atom bomb, which is the other half of the diptych, is quite terrifying. Now, there's something about that mushroom cloud shape, which is a very mid-century modern form. People made lamps out of it in the 1950s, that distinct form.
I guess so. You think of a Tiffany lamp or something like that when you say that?
No, I think it's something a bit later. There's actually a lamp, and I can't remember who the designer of it, that's called the mushroom lamp, and it was popular in the 50s. And it's interesting how all of that sort of atomic anxiety leached its way into design of the 1950s in biomorphic forms. But Jessica sort of revives it, and it's interesting to sort of see the natural disaster or the natural sort of terror sublime, and then the man-made,
right.
and how those two things sort of parallel each other.
Fascinating. So let's go back to, because I skipped over her, Mickalene is her name?
Mickalene Thomas, yes. She's a wonderful, wonderful artist who's getting a lot of attention these days, and we're very lucky to have a large-scale color photograph by her that's in the exhibition.
Which is not typical of her work, right?
No, it's quite different. And we had had a lot of discussion with her studios about her participating in the show. If you've been to the Brooklyn Museum, or if anyone in the audience goes to the Brooklyn Museum, in recent months, coming up for another year, I think, they've done a rehang of their their historic American collections. And when you go to the 5th floor of the Brooklyn Museum, it's now set up so you get off the elevator, down one hall you see an immense Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington wearing his epaulets and his general's costume and looking very, presidential, as we think of that in the historical sense. And then down the other hall, Down the other enfilade at the end is a huge Michelin Thomas painting of a black female nude odalisque covered with rhinestones. And it really sets up this whole distinction and discussion about what is American art, what does it mean to be American, male, female, black, white, nude, clothed, traditional painting versus more contemporary work. It's a really interesting counterbalance. And so Michelin is very interested in doing works that have historical references but are also very, very bold and contemporary and of the moment.
Well, I think this is a reference to Calder, is it, in this one,
yes.
in this case?
This is a large photograph that she did for an exhibition that was celebrating the great sculptor Alexander Calder, who also made jewelry. And in the picture, you'll see the model is wearing this very elaborate necklace that's actually Calder sculpture, jewelry. Okay. And she's got face painting. Her face is sort of bedazzled in this almost sort of warrior paint. She's got a very aggressive, dominating stance with her leg out. Every time I look at this picture, I think about Angelina Jolie a couple of years ago at the Oscars. I don't know if you remember. She sort of stuck her leg out in a very sort of dramatic pose, and everyone made fun of it later on. But it's a very assertive kind of pose. And then she's in this room with fake vinyl paneling and sort of op art kind of sofas behind her, so you get all this sort of bedazzlement, sort of camouflage.
Is it her in the picture?
No, that's a model.
Oh,
so it's a model.
Yeah, it feels a little asexual. You're not sure if it's
a little androgynous.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I don't know if they say asexual, but there is a certain kind of androgyny about it, and that had not really occurred to me. It was when we had students coming through, and I was saying that, well, is that really a woman in the picture?
Yeah.
And I hadn't really sort of thought about that. I think that it is, but yeah, you can sort of what you bring to the piece. It's so interesting with the art students and the college students coming through. They have a totally different frame of reference than I do. You know, it's interesting sort of what 20-odd years of looking at art will bring you in terms of knowledge, but also I get so much from the students coming in. I've written wall labels for all of these pieces, and I could sort of rewrite them again with another 100 observations just from the things people have been talking about.
But that's the best part of it. The viewer brings their own idea into the piece, and it becomes something new and different. And you know,
it does.
I love that. That's and I love it if it is something that you see different each time. You go to see it the first time, and then the second time, you go, whoa, I didn't see that. I feel like that's the living art.
Yes, it is. And you, being an artist yourself, you know that that there's often, I say to the students, like, it's not just a confrontation or that listen to me yak on about what this is so great about this artist, but I said a lot of the classes that come through, I say at the end, be prepared to tell me something you don't like in this show and what you think its shortcoming is. You can't just tell me it's gross or boring. You have to sort of dig down into what is the artist missing here? What are they not able to accomplish? What have they sort of put out as a provocation that you don't accept? Because those are all really interesting questions, and the artist puts it out there, and the viewer has to bring the other half of the discussion. You know, it's an open-ended question.
No, and it doesn't have to be beautiful.
No,
like
not at all.
And it can be beautiful and you not like it. And I think, so do you get an answer from them? Does everybody find something they don't like?
Many times that they do. Many times they're sort of indifferent. But, there is, my great curatorial question I've been interested in for years and years is the question of beauty, particularly in contemporary art. And beauty, to me, is very different than prettiness. Beauty can be strange. It can, what the French call beautiful ugly. It's more difficult, it's more challenging than just prettiness, but I think that something has to be visually beautiful before it can be anything else as an artwork. There are so many artists working on political statements, certainly in today's society, and there are oftentimes I see things that would be better as a play, a screed, a book, a documentary,
a newspaper
article,
right.
a manifesto,
right.
But to produce it as visual art, you have to have something visually compelling. And I don't mean by beautiful that it's got to be, a gorgeous woman with pretty lips. It has to have something that engages you at the visual level.
Well, I always refer to Francis Bacon, whose work it makes me have a stomach ache. It's a visceral reaction. But I think his work is beautiful.
It is, but it's so unnerving. I remember the Yale Center for British Art years ago did a Francis Bacon show, and he hasn't gotten that many shows in New York, at least in my memory, in the last 20 years. But he's a powerful, powerful artist who you just feel so on edge.
You do.
It's not the sort of thing you'd want to beauty you'd want to live over
you
your
don't want to
sofa,
live with,
but it is beautiful
Right,
in its
right,
own kind of screaming existential
so,
way.
so let's talk a little bit about the shark, who's beautiful in nature.
Yes.
And that's another bedazzled.
Yes, well, we mentioned Damien Hirst being very well known for his shark in formaldehyde, which has a kind of stillness. I was on view at the Met for several years, I think, and I went back and looked at it. It had been a number of years since he had made it.
Do you know that one is not the original one?
Yes, I know the shark deteriorated, and he was forced to put in a new shark.
And I got to tell you, I think that one was deteriorating too.
Really? Yes. It's everything formaldehyde. Everything deteriorates. That's the you have to. I mean, the penny piece that we were referencing earlier. I think that will gradually begin to decay. You know, the color striations in that are of the moment. 50 years from now, it's not going to look like that. That piece.
True.
You know, you have to sort of. It's built in the change, not necessarily for the worse, but a change nonetheless.
Well, yeah, I think that's interesting. Were we supposed to clean up the Sistine Chapel? You know, like that kind
I
of
know
thing?
that was such a debate whether we were supposed to be such brilliantly hued colors, and people wanted the patina of age about it. I think about that a lot with classical sculpture, which was, you know, Greek sculpture was really brilliantly colored and painted and looked like pagan art, and our view of it such through an 18th century British lens of like, here's everything white, pure marble, Robert Adam coming out of that, and it's just a very different, our whole idea of neoclassicism is kind of skewed by something that has just aged badly.
And that there are so many artists today, too, that are allowing things to deteriorate. And
yes, that's a huge field for conservators and registrars at museums about like what should deteriorate and how should it deteriorate and what can you expect to keep pristine.
We went to see the Rothkos in Boston.
Yes.
And they didn't touch them, they're changing it with light.
I thought it was a fascinating idea, the filters that were put on them to get them back to what they thought was close to the original color. It was a very innovative conservation technique.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So let's get back to the shark.
Yes, the shark. We have our own shark. We don't have Damien Hirst shark, but we have our own bedazzled shark in the show, which
I thought was photoshopped.
Yes, a lot of people do. A lot of people don't realize it's a photograph. It's by a photographer named Chris Lady, who's a wonderful photographer. And when I was working on Bedazzled, the last thing I would have thought was putting in a nature photograph. But he showed me this image, and it's of a nurse. I believe it's a whale shark or a nurse shark. I'm sorry, I can't remember which.
It's okay.
But
not a polka dot
shark. And what you're looking at is he was on a deep sea dive at night with his camera. And the shark was swimming about 100 feet, or maybe less than that, below him. And he took a flash on his camera, and the shark phosphoresced the way it would in nature. And so it's not photoshopped at all. The shark has all of these phosphorescent spots on it. And it became this sort of idea of nature's bedazzlement and how nature can sort of stun you with its beauty and its pattern. And we have it on a wall with several other kind of monochromatic things, and I think it really works very well together as a kind of different look at bedazzlement.
Let's talk a little bit about the sculptures too. You have a Lisa Lou.
Liza with a Z, not Lisa with an S. Liza Lou, yes.
Liza Lou.
Wonderful. Now, she's best known, some of your viewers might have seen her work years ago in Grand Central Station. She had a piece called The Kitchen, which I think was on view there. It was an entire suburban kitchen, which she hand beaded.
I don't know if you can conceptualize that, but literally every surface had
beadwork on it,
beadwork, not pasted.
No, it was all sewn beadwork. And she did that original piece herself. I think it took her 4 or 5 years of beading every day nonstop to get this kitchen. And it created a magical piece. And then she followed it up with a backyard. I think she did sort of a suburban backyard.
Yeah, but I think in the kitchen, every box of cereal,
the refrigerator, the dishes were all done in beadwork. And so what we have is just, Liza Lou is sort of, when you think about the mother of beading and this sort of ornamentalism, I really think of her. And so we have a little teacup, a really sort of precious object, that actually a coffee cup, I guess, that she beaded that she made a series of these coffee cups when she was raising money for a project a number of years ago. And Madeline Jordan, who runs a gallery in Scarsdale, was very kind enough to lend it to us for the piece. It's one of her sort of treasured items. And it's just great because I think it reminds me a lot of Merritt Oppenheim, the great modernist sculptor. Her fur teacup, which was this idea of an object that had no utilitarian purpose. And of course, if you see a teacup that's covered with fur and the teaspoon is covered with fur, and you get, when you look at that, so visceral a sense of like what that would be. Like to try to drink out of or to put that into your mouth is very telling. And so this is a nice sort of little play on that almost 75, 80 years later, I guess.
But I love that when you look into the teacup or the coffee cup, actually it probably is coffee because it's very dark.
It's very dark, yes.
But it's all
I never think of coffee cups as having a saucer, but this one does, yeah. So you can, like our big mugs here.
Right, you're right. You know, I think we skipped over some other tornado or hurricane.
Yes, we're going to go back. Yeah, so we talked about the volcano and Jessica Johnson's piece, and there's a whole group of works in the show that play around with the idea of natural bedazzlement, and that usually comes when you think about being bedazzled by nature. It's oftentimes these big weather events that you look at. So Megan Suttles, who's the artist who did our lobby piece with the bobby pins, she's compared that to insects. A lot of people think about it as a swarm of insects, but her metaphor when we were describing doing the piece and responding to the Marcel Breuer arches of the building was a tornado. It's site specific. Was to think about it in terms of a tornado. So down at the base of it, it's got a really sort of intense clustering of these bobby pins, and then they sort of open up in a cone shape in the whole gallery. So that's sort of interesting. But we also had people working with other tornadoes. Barbara Takanaga, who's an artist who shows with DC Moore Gallery in Chelsea. She has her Blue Twister, which is a sort of very sweet kind of tornado, I guess. It's a softer version of a tornado.
Is that the one with all the beads on it?
That's painted. Then we also have a Hurricane by Viva Galhotra, which is a wonderful. They're weather patterns of hurricanes in the Indian Ocean, which she has converted into these works that are made of beads, and they're actually bells. They're thousands and thousands of tiny bells called gungros, and they are what appear on the traditional hems of saris of women in India, or on their wrists or their ankles when they're doing traditional dancing. And they are just loaded onto these canvases, which are also about 300 pounds each. And they're really, you can't really capture them in the photographs. You have to come down to the gallery and see. They're very opalescent. They're almost sort of like mother of pearl.
And they're all different colors.
And they're all different colors.
That's making that pattern.
Yeah, so you've got beige and cream and ivory and taupe and gold and some black in there. So they're even though the color palette is quite reduced in terms of neutrals, she's able to convey a huge sort of sense of depth to them, and really a shimmeriness that's almost like the inside of an oyster. Really beautiful.
I'm glad we ended on this one because it's true. Everyone has to go down.
Everyone has to go down. Yes, right off the Mosh Loop Parkway. Zoom right in.
Very easy to get there, and you park along the reservoir, which is so beautiful, and then walk right into the.
Yes, come and see our show, and we're completely free, which we should say it's free.
And you should go in Gate 4 because there are several gates.
There are several gates. Yes.
Right, Gate 4 is the closest one, and there's a little construction, but I'm sure that's going to be done.
Oh yes, we hope so. We're up through January 14th, the exhibition, and we hope that people will come over the holidays.
I hope so. It's beautiful. So thanks so much for coming and telling us all about it.
Thank you, Gigi. It was my pleasure.
And thank you for watching.